The year was 1963, in a small town in Alabama. The library was quiet, filled with the smell of old books and the sound of pages turning. Miss Rosa, a white librarian in her 30s, stood behind the counter. She had soft grey eyes and carried herself with calm dignity. To most people, she was just a librarian. But in secret, Rosa was doing something dangerous. Each night, when the library closed, she stayed behind to write and mail letters for the young men and women fighting for civil rights. Many of them could not use their real names or real addresses because of fear. So Rosa helped. She typed their words on her old machine, slipped them into envelopes, and mailed them across the South. The letters carried hope, instructions, prayers, and warnings. But one night, Rosa stopped at a single letter. Her hands trembled as she read the words written by a child, barely 12. The girl's name was Sarah. Sarah had marched in Birmingham, had faced police dogs and water hoses. Her letter was not a report, not a plan. It was a plea. She wrote to her cousin, telling her not to give up. She spoke of faith, of the dream of equality, and of how tired she was of being treated as less than human. Rosa stared at the letter for hours. She wanted to mail it. She should have mailed it. But something inside her whispered that this letter needed to be hidden, preserved. So she folded it carefully and slid it between the pages of a thick history book, a book no one ever borrowed. Then she locked the library door and went home. Rosa never told anyone. Not the leaders she served, not the children who marched, not even herself when she asked why. She buried the letter in silence. And there it stayed. For 58 long years. Until the day a brown-skinned high school boy named David pulled that very book from a dusty shelf. David had always loved hiding in the library. He was 17, smart but restless, often feeling like the world had already chosen paths for him that he didn't want to follow. His skin made him stand out at school, his ideas made him different from his friends, and his quietness made people mistake him for weak. That afternoon, he was supposed to be working on a history project. Instead, he wandered into the back section, where no one ever went. His hand reached up to grab an old book with faded gold lettering. It was heavier than he expected. When he opened it, something slid out. A yellowed envelope. It was sealed, brittle, but still whole. On the front was a name written in neat handwriting, Sarah Johnson. David frowned. The year written in the corner was 1963. His heart beat faster. This was no ordinary paper. He sat down and carefully tore the envelope open. Inside was a letter written in uneven handwriting, the kind a child might use. He read the words aloud, softly. Dear cousin. They treat us like we are less, but we are not less. I am tired, but I will not stop. I hope one day we can sit together in peace. Do not give up. Keep walking. Keep singing. We are not alone. Love. Sarah. David's hand shook. His chest tightened. He could feel the weight of history pressing on him. Was Sarah still alive? Who was she? And why had this letter never been sent? He didn't know yet. But he was about to find out. And the truth would change his life forever. The next day, David could not think about schoolwork. He carried the letter everywhere, hidden in his backpack. At night, when the house was quiet, he searched online for the name Sarah Johnson. At first, there were too many results. But then he found her. Not just alive. Not just surviving. She was a state senator. A woman who had marched as a child, now leading with power. David stared at the screen, his heart pounding. The letter in his bag was hers. The one she never received. The last letter Miss Rosa didn't mail. David sat on his bed, staring at the glow of his laptop screen. The image of Senator Sarah Johnson looked back at him. She was older now, in her 70s, with short silver hair and sharp, kind eyes. The headline above her picture read, "From child of Birmingham to state senator, Sarah Johnson reflects on civil rights struggle." His chest felt tight. The words in the letter were from her younger self. A scared but determined 12-year-old girl. And somehow, the words had never reached the cousin she had written to. He reread the letter, tracing the lines with his finger as if the ink itself carried power. Do not give up. Keep walking. Keep singing. Why hadn't the letter been mailed? Who kept it hidden? And why did he, of all people, have to find it now? The question circled in his head all night. He barely slept. By morning, he had made a decision. He couldn't keep this to himself. The letter didn't belong to him. It belonged to Sarah. But another thought made him pause. What if she didn't want to see it? What if it reminded her of pain she had buried long ago? At breakfast, David's mother noticed his silence. You look troubled, she said, pouring coffee into a chipped white mug. David hesitated, then pulled the envelope from his backpack and slid it across the table. His mother frowned, opening it carefully. As she read, her lips parted, her eyes widening. Where did you get this? She whispered. In the library, David said. In an old book. She pressed the letter to her chest, shaking her head slowly. This is history, David. Real history. You can't keep this secret. I know, David said softly. But what if she doesn't want to remember? His mother leaned forward. Son, sometimes the past hurts. But sometimes, the past heals. You have to give her the choice. David swallowed hard. She was right. That afternoon, after school, he walked back into the library. His heart raced as he stood before the same dusty shelves. He wanted answers. And he was going to start with the name written on the library's first page, Miss Rosa Whitfield, head librarian, 1963. David spent hours digging through the old library archives. He found ye-books, photos, even old staff lists. There she was, Miss Rosa. Her picture was in black and white, tucked into the library's 50th anniversary booklet. A young woman with calm eyes and a half smile. Something about her face made David pause. She didn't look like the other staff in the pictures. The others posed stiffly, coldly. But Rosa? Rosa's eyes seemed alive, almost secretive. The more David read, the more questions grew. Why had she hidden the letter? Had she been a friend to the movement, or a betrayer? That night, he searched her name online. To his surprise, he found an obituary. Miss Rosa had passed away 10 years earlier. The article was short: beloved librarian Rosa Whitfield, dedicated to literacy and education, dies at 82. No mention of her role in civil rights. No mention of letters. David sat back in his chair, frustrated. The one person who could explain why the letter had never been sent was gone. But maybe there were still people alive who remembered her? The next day, he asked the oldest librarian on staff, Mrs. Green, about Rosa. Miss Whitfield. Mrs. Green said, adjusting her glasses. Oh, yes. I was a young assistant when she worked here. Strict, but kind. Quiet woman. Kept to herself. Was she involved in the civil rights movement? David asked carefully. Mrs. Green looked around, then lowered her voice. I don't know what you've heard, but back then, being involved was dangerous. For a white woman especially. Still, she hesitated, eyes narrowing. Some say she did more than people knew. Helped quietly. Protected people. David's heart jumped. Protected them how? Mrs. Green shrugged. Letters. Rumors of letters. I never saw them, but I heard whispers. David's breath caught. The truth was closer. And yet, it still felt far away. He left the library that day with two things burning inside him, the weight of history in his backpack, and a new question echoing in his mind. What would happen if Senator Sarah Johnson read the words she had written as a child, words she never even knew had survived? At school the next week, David couldn't concentrate. He walked through crowded hallways, but all he saw was the letter. He sat in class, but all he heard was Sarah's voice, written across decades, "Do not give up. Keep walking. Keep singing." His best friend, Marcus, noticed his distraction. "You look like a ghost," Marcus whispered during math. "What's up?" David hesitated. He hadn't told anyone except his mother. But Marcus had been his friend since childhood. Maybe he could help. "Promise you won't laugh," David said. Marcus raised an eyebrow. "I don't laugh at you, man." So David pulled the letter out, unfolding it on the desk between them. Marcus squinted at the faded paper, then whistled softly. "Dang," he said. "This looks old." "It is," David said. He explained everything, the book, the name, the senator. Marcus listened, his mouth hanging open. When David finished, he shook his head. "Bro," Marcus said. "You sitting on a bomb. You gotta give that to her." "I know," David muttered. "But what if she doesn't want it?" Marcus leaned closer. "Then at least you tried. But keeping it? That's not your choice, man. That letter ain't yours." David looked down at the fragile paper. Marcus was right. But the fear in his chest was still heavy. Later that night, as rain tapped against his window, David made up his mind. He would try to reach Sarah Johnson. Even if it changed everything. That weekend, David sat at his desk with the letter in front of him and his phone in his hand. His palms were sweaty. How do you even call a senator? He searched online and found an office number. His finger hovered over the dial, his stomach twisting. Finally, he pressed it. The line rang twice before a calm voice answered. "Office of Senator Sarah Johnson, how may I help you?" David froze. His throat closed up. My name's David," he stammered. I found something. For Senator Johnson. Something from her past." There was a pause. Then the assistant said, "What kind of something?" David swallowed. "A letter. From 1963. Written by her. When she was 12. The silence on the line grew heavy. Then the assistant spoke again, voice sharper. "Please hold." David's heart pounded as the seconds dragged on. Finally, a new voice came on the line. Older, steady, but carrying a weight of years. "This is Sarah Johnson." David almost dropped the phone. His throat felt dry. "Senator, I think I have something that belongs to you." "Explain," she said. So he did. Every word. By the time he finished, she was silent. Then, softly, she whispered, "You need to bring me that letter." David's hand shook as he hung up the phone. He couldn't believe it, he had just spoken to Senator Sarah Johnson herself. Her voice still echoed in his ears, calm yet heavy with something he couldn't name. He lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling. What if this was too big for him? He was just a 17-year-old kid. He wasn't ready to carry history in his backpack. But now, there was no turning back. She wanted the letter. The next day, he skipped basketball practice and took the bus downtown. His backpack felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Every bump of the bus made him check the zipper, making sure the letter was still safe. When he arrived at the state building, security checked his bag. He almost panicked when the guard pulled out the yellowed envelope. "What's this?" the guard asked. David's mouth went dry. Just a letter. For Senator Johnson." The guard studied him, then the paper, before slowly handing it back. "Don't lose it," he said. David nodded quickly. Minutes later, he sat in a waiting room outside Sarah Johnson's office. His knees bounced, his palms slick with sweat. He wanted to run. But then the door opened. "David," a voice asked. He looked up. Senator Sarah Johnson stood there, tall and steady despite her years. Her silver hair framed her face, but her eyes, sharp, strong, and kind, felt like they could see right through him. David rose awkwardly, clutching the letter. "Come in," she said softly. Inside her office, books lined the shelves. Photographs of marches and rallies covered the walls. She gestured to a chair. David sat, his heart pounding. "The letter," she said. David pulled it from his bag and placed it gently on the desk between them. Sarah reached for it with trembling fingers. For a long moment, she just stared at the handwriting, her lips parting. Then she opened it. As her eyes moved across the faded words, tears began to spill down her cheeks. "Oh my Lord," she whispered. "I wrote this. I remember." She pressed a hand to her mouth, her shoulders shaking. David sat frozen, unsure if he should speak. He had never seen someone so powerful look so broken and so human. When she finally looked up, her eyes were shining. "Where did you find this?" she asked. "In the library," David said quietly. "Inside an old book." It was hidden. Sarah sat back, her face pale. "Rosa," she whispered. "It must have been Rosa." David leaned forward. "You knew her?" Sarah nodded slowly. "Oh yes. We all knew Miss Rosa. But what we didn't know was just how much she did for us." For hours, Sarah told David stories. Stories of Birmingham in 1963. Of marching children, police dogs, fire hoses, and jail cells too crowded to breathe. She was only 12, but she remembered the fear as clearly as yesterday. And she remembered Rosa. "She was the librarian who helped us," Sarah said softly. "We were just kids, but she treated us like we mattered. She typed our letters, mailed them when we couldn't. She gave us books, told us knowledge was our weapon. We didn't always understand, but she believed in us." David listened, hanging on every word. "But why would she hide your letter?" he asked. Sarah's face clouded. She turned the envelope over in her hand. "I don't know." Rosa was careful. She lived in two worlds, the white world that wanted us silenced, and the black world that needed her help. Maybe she thought this letter was too dangerous. Or maybe she wanted it kept safe for the future. She looked at David, her eyes steady now. "And now, here you are. The future she saved it for." David blinked. "Me?" Sarah nodded. "Do you think it was an accident that you found it? History doesn't work that way. Rosa wanted this moment. She wanted someone young to carry it forward." David felt his chest tighten. He was just a kid. He didn't want to carry history. He wanted to play ball, listen to music, and pass his classes. But when Sarah placed her hand over his, warm and steady, he felt the weight shift. "You've been chosen," she said softly. David swallowed hard. "Chosen for what?" Sarah smiled sadly. "To finish what was never finished." That night, David couldn't sleep. The words kept circling in his mind, to finish what was never finished. But what did that mean? He sat at his desk, staring at the letter. Sarah's words were filled with fire, even as a child. "Do not give up. Keep walking. Keep singing. We are not alone." Was Rosa trying to tell the future something through this letter? He thought about Sarah, about her tears in the office, about the way she had looked at him, not just as a boy, but as someone who mattered. But why him? At breakfast, he tried to push the thoughts away. But his mother noticed. "What's wrong, David?" she asked. "Nothing," he said quickly. She gave him a look that cut right through him. "The letter again." He sighed, nodding. "Senator Johnson thinks Miss Rosa meant for me to find it. Like I'm supposed to do something with it." His mother tilted her head. "And what do you think?" David stared down at his cereal. "I think I'm scared." His mother reached across the table, squeezing his hand. "Son, courage isn't about not being scared. It's about what you do while you're scared. Her words settled deep in his chest. At school, Marcus pulled him aside. So? Did you meet her? David nodded. And? She cried, David said softly. She remembered everything. She thinks Rosa hid it for the future. For me. Marcus let out a low whistle. Man, that's heavy. David shoved his hands in his pockets. Yeah. And I don't even know what to do with it. Marcus grinned. Then figure it out. Maybe this is your mission. David rolled his eyes. I'm not some hero. Marcus leaned closer. Maybe you don't get to decide that. That weekend, David's phone buzzed. It was a number he didn't know. When he answered, Sarah's voice filled his ear. David? I've been thinking. There's more you need to see. What do you mean? Rosa didn't just hide your letter. She hid others. I'm sure of it. David froze. Others? Yes, Sarah said firmly. And together, we're going to find them. David's mind spun after Sarah's call. More letters? He hadn't even thought about that possibility. One letter was heavy enough, but others meant Miss Rosa had hidden an entire story inside the library. Why me? He asked softly into the phone. Sarah's voice was calm but firm. Because you found the first one. History chooses its messengers, David. We don't always get to pick. The next afternoon, David returned to the library. Sarah had arranged to meet him there, away from cameras, away from the press. When he walked into the old history section, she was already waiting, her silver hair catching the light from the tall windows. Thank you for coming, she said with a tired smile. This library, it feels like a time machine. Together they searched the dusty shelves. Sarah ran her fingers along the spines, eyes scanning with the sharpness of someone who had once lived in the shadows of fear. Rosa wouldn't have picked random places, she murmured. She believed in patterns. In hiding things where people wouldn't look. For hours they searched, pulling books off shelves, flipping through pages. David began to lose hope, dust coating his fingers, his throat dry. But then, inside a thick dictionary, he felt something stiff. He froze. Senator, he whispered. I think I found one. Sarah rushed over as he slid out another yellowed envelope. The name on the front read, James Carter. David's hands shook as Sarah opened it. Inside were words written in careful cursive, older than the childlike scrawl of her first letter. It wasn't from her this time, it was from another marcher. The letter spoke of a secret meeting, of danger, of betrayal. David's stomach turned. This sounds like someone warned them. Someone inside the movement was leaking information. Sarah's face went pale. Rosa kept this for a reason. The air grew heavy around them. Miss Rosa wasn't just saving letters. She was saving secrets. The discovery shook David to his core. He and Sarah sat in silence, staring at the fragile paper as if it might burn them. Finally, Sarah spoke. This changes everything. David frowned. What do you mean? This isn't just history, David. This is evidence. If someone betrayed us back then, if Rosa knew, she trailed off, pressing the letter to her chest. There are truths here that people buried deep. Maybe too deep. David felt cold. So what do we do? Sarah looked at him, her eyes sharp. We keep looking. Rosa didn't want these to disappear. She wanted them to be found. Over the next week, David balanced school with secret trips to the library. Marcus covered for him when teachers asked questions. His mother worried but trusted him when he said it mattered. Every day, he and Sarah unearthed more. Letters from children who were jailed, from mothers begging for their kids' safety, from leaders planning marches in whispers. Some were hopeful, others full of fear. Each one carried the voices of people who refused to be silenced. But the betrayals, those were the hardest to read. One letter spoke of a man who gave names to the police. Another hinted that meetings were being watched. David couldn't believe it. They had spies. Sarah nodded grimly. Always. Every movement has them. But Rosa, she kept the proof. Maybe she thought one day the truth would matter. David felt a heavy weight press on him. These weren't just letters. They were lives. And now they were in his hands. But not everyone was happy. One evening, as David left the library, a car slowed beside him. The window rolled down. "Hey, kid," a voice called. David froze. Two men sat inside, both in dark suits. Their faces were hard, unreadable. "You the one digging around the old stacks?" one asked. David's mouth went dry. Who are you?" The man smirked. "Let's just say not all history likes to be dug up." The car rolled away slowly, leaving David standing frozen on the sidewalk, his heart pounding. For the first time, he realized. Finding the letters wasn't just about the past. It was about the present. And someone didn't want the truth coming out. The next day, David told Sarah about the car. Her face darkened. "I was afraid of this," she said. "You knew?" David asked. She nodded slowly. "History isn't dead, David. The people who benefited from silence are still alive. And some of them still hold power." David shivered. "So what do we do?" Sarah leaned closer. "We keep going. But we do it carefully." Rosa risked her life to protect these letters. Now it's our turn. David looked down at his shaking hands. He wasn't a fighter. He wasn't brave like Sarah had been at 12. But as he thought about the words of her letter, "Do not give up. Keep walking. Keep singing." Something inside him hardened. Maybe he wasn't brave yet. But he could learn. By the end of that week, they had uncovered 6 letters. Each one added a piece to a puzzle David didn't fully understand. A story of courage, betrayal, and silence. But one letter stood out. It was sealed with wax, unlike the others. The paper was heavier, the handwriting formal. On the front, instead of a name, it only said, "For tomorrow." David's breath caught. What does that mean? Sarah held it in her hands, her expression unreadable. "Rosa left this for the future," she whispered. David leaned forward. "For us?" Sarah nodded slowly. "Yes. For us." They looked at each other, the air thick with tension. Whatever was inside that letter, Rosa hadn't written it for the past. She had written it for now. The sealed envelope lay on the desk between them. For tomorrow. David's hands trembled. He had never been so afraid of opening a piece of paper. Sarah touched his arm gently. "We'll do it together." Slowly, she broke the wax seal. The paper unfolded with a soft crackle, carrying the smell of old ink and dust. Rosa's handwriting filled the page. Her words were steady, careful, like a voice speaking across time. "Dear tomorrow. If you are reading this, then my small act of hiding letters was not in vain. I was only a librarian, but I could not stay silent. I could not watch children march, sing, and suffer without leaving something behind. The world will change because of them. But change is never finished. There will always be those who fight for freedom and those who fight against it. These letters are not just the past. They are torches. Each of you must decide whether to carry the flame forward or let it die in the dark. I do not know your name, reader. But I know you are living in the tomorrow I dreamed of. And I ask you, humbly, to do one thing: do not forget us. Do not forget the songs, the marches, the pain, and the hope. Tell the story. Carry it farther than we ever could. Because freedom is never given. It is carried. Signed, Rosa Whitfield. 1963 The words hung in the air, heavy and holy. David wiped at his eyes, but the tears kept falling. He looked at Sarah, and she was crying too, clutching the letter like it was a lifeline. She knew, Sarah whispered. She knew we would need this. David's voice shook. She was talking to me. To us. To everyone now. Sarah reached for his hand, her grip strong despite her trembling. Rosa gave us the burden and the gift. And you, David, you answered. For the first time, David didn't feel like just a boy carrying history. He felt like part of it. The fear in his chest loosened, replaced with something deeper. Purpose. Together, they stood by the window, looking out at the city. The sun was setting, casting long golden light across the streets where generations had walked, marched, and bled. David whispered the words from the first letter, the one that had started it all. Do not give up. Keep walking. Keep singing. We are not alone. Sarah squeezed his hand. And for the first time, across 58 years, across silence and secrecy, the letter finally reached its destination. Not in an envelope. Not through the mail. But in the hearts of the living. And the future was listening.